Hi,
Everyone.
Mary Biasotti. Oh, wow, look at all these folks.
We're so happy to have you guys join us this morning. Forgive my tardiness. This is one of the days when I actually overslept. But as my mama said, I got myself together in a New York 2 minutes.
Oh, you're always together, my dear.
So welcome to our second series on our Thrive Masterclass. And this series was really born out of the need to really help the faith community and faith-based organizations sort of like pivot and shift into post-COVID to be their best and to do their best. And we all know that we're still sort of like in the middle of it. This is something that's going to be with us. It's kind of like when you become a parent, you think, oh, well, they're going to go off to college when they're 18 and everything's going to be great. But those of us who are parents who've decided to become parents, we all know that it's almost a lifetime journey and commitment because there's always something happening. So we decided to bring this series to you really to really counteract some of the situations that would be happening post-COVID because our lives are completely different, how we run our organizations, how we communicate, how we provide our services, resources that are available. And our dear Carmen Bogan with Bogan Consulting Group decided to join us along with our illustrious Saran, who's my teammate. None of this work could not be done without her. So kudos to Saran. So this is our second series, and we are moving into a new dynamic era where it's going to be completely different from the first series. So if you missed the first series, you actually have an opportunity to go on our website and check out that toolkit that Carmen and Saran created. It's a wealth of knowledge. Now, our vision is the resilience to survive. This is what's happening today. 8 approaches to saving and growing your organization during turbulent times. I am ecstatic about our speaker, our presenter. I'm ecstatic about Carmen. I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to Carmen. And thank you guys for coming. I asked for 2 things from you. The first one is please complete the survey. Please complete the survey. The only way we know what you want and what to bring to you is if you guys share that information with us. The second is invite your friends in other organizations so that they can glean off of this knowledge. Carmen, it's in your hands. Thank you guys again for joining us.
Thank you. I'd like to add something to that. And what I'd like to add to it is that I know a lot of you who are in this room and you are dynamic leaders. And just as we say that, in the classroom, students learn from each other, our leaders in this classroom learn from each other as well. So don't be silent at your end because this is going to be a very interactive session. It should be a very interactive session because that's the way it is designed and you can learn a lot and we can learn a lot from you. Before we start, Saran, I'm going to ask you if you could bring up this introduction because I really want to introduce Dr. David B. Franklin. Now, David has made sure that I don't say anything that I'm not supposed to say in this because he's so humble and I'm so effusive when I talk about David that he makes me tamp it down. So I have a script here and you all know I never stick with script. So there may be just a couple words here that are my own. But David B. Franklin is a nonprofit strategist who has funded, built, and accelerated growth for nonprofit organizations over the past 15 years. Not only that, David is a father and a husband and an extremely busy person who seems to get it all done. His work has encompassed foundations, schools, relief organizations, and churches with an intense belief that organizational culture drives outcomes. I agree with that. David has focused his efforts on helping organizations create and improve systems that support a strong organizational culture. The thing I like about this is that when we talk about systems, it is sustainable. It is not patchwork. And so that is the kind of work that David does. In addition to his work as a consultant, David currently serves as the lead pastor for Miracle City Church. Miracle City is a thriving congregation in Southwest Baltimore. Good thing about Zoom, we can have David here to speak to us with a focus on community development. I saw a wonderful video of David and his son, and his son was interviewing him, and the question, David, how old is your son? The one that was interviewing you?
8 years old.
8 years old. And his question was so deep. He said, why do you do this? Why do you do this work? So I think David will probably start telling us a little bit about this. Under his leadership, I need that back, Saran. I don't know what happened. I just lost my screen. Okay. Under his leadership, Miracle City Church has become a leader within the Southwest Baltimore community and is now guiding a coalition of community organizations to revitalize the Frederick Avenue corridor. Maybe he'll tell us a little bit about that. David is also a sought-after speaker. He's been very generous with his time because I think his auntie, you know his auntie, Sandra Alexander with Occur, and her nephews and her family, very dynamic family. He leads lectures and conducts trainings on organization development, community engagement, and leadership. He is currently completing a PhD in organization development. He's basically finished the thing. And so I'm already calling him Dr. Franklin. And he's like, no, not yet. He's extremely humble and is working to develop a model for improving the organizational health of nonprofit organizations, which leads us right into this topic. Now, quick thing about the topic. The topic, you all know that this has been, I don't have to tell any of you, it's been a turbulent time. And with nonprofit organizations, sometimes you go back. We get a lot of focus on where did that restaurant go, but we're not getting enough attention on where did that nonprofit go in these times. And during turbulent times, many nonprofits have not survived. And that's why in this masterclass, we have asked David to talk about how to survive and how to be sustainable. So with no further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. David B. Franklin.
Well, listen, thank you, Carmen Bogan, for that gratuitous introduction. And I really am privileged to be here. And thank you for how you facilitate all of this, Carmen, to bring these topics to life. Just truly grateful for you and Saran Stokes working there behind the scenes, connecting the dots. We appreciate you so much. As well as to Michelle Miles Chambers. We really got to give gratitude for your leadership with FACE and for your willingness to put this program together so that nonprofits, so that the FACE community can operate at the highest level. So truly grateful to you, Michelle, for your leadership in this program, and to the foundation, the San Francisco Foundation, for undergirding all of this. I'm truly grateful. There's a lot that I could talk about as an introduction. My family, who I do just want to say that I am absolutely in love with my wife and my two boys. And I think my sons might be checking in right now, but along with my wife, I believe they may be on. So much love to you all. And thank you for all your support. But there's a lot I could say, but I'm going to we got a lot to get through today. So I'm going to get to that. But there is one opening story that I want to share, because today I really am not just saying that I'm privileged to be here just because that's what speakers say. Actually, this is somewhat of a full circle moment for me, because I interned in the FACE program back when I was in high school. This is way back when Landon Williams and Fred Blackwell, who's now the CEO of the San Francisco Foundation, they were leading out, and I think there were some others there as well. But this is back, right? This I think I might have been part of the first cohort. I'm not sure, but anyway, it was in those early days.
You were.
Oh, I was. Is that right? Yeah. So in those, I was partnered with a nonprofit organization They were doing a campaign, trying to get some awareness around a project they were running, and I was there to help with marketing. Now, I can't say how much value I added to the organization, but here's what I can say, and why this is today is important for me, is it was one of those summers that was an eye-opening moment. You know, you have those experiences in life where it's like, something clicks. And that summer was one of those moments for me where I began to understand how deep community work can generate real progress. And as a result of that experience and others, I have dedicated my career to improving and trying to uplift communities across the country. And so I really am privileged here to be able to kind of deposit back into a place that has made such an indelible imprint on my life. So I'm really grateful to be here. Grateful that each of you are here and you're representing your organizations, because I think we can make some progress today, y'all. And so I need you to open up your minds, your hearts, your spirit, and let's jump into this so that we can progress forward. The title of today's topic or presentation is The Resilience to Thrive, 8 Strategies to Saving and Growing Your Organization During Turbulent Times. Now, I want to be clear on that. We're talking about saving your organization and growing it, because we don't just want our organizations to survive, we want them to grow. Because to the extent that our organizations grow is the extent that we can have great impact on our community. So we don't want just these big, grandiose organizations for the sake of having a big organization that's robust. We want that organization so that we can continue to level up our impact, right? We can continue to level up the results that we're able to realize as we work along with the communities that we serve. And so let me say here as we get started that I've been steeped in this research for a few years now. So if I get in the weeds, feel free to just put in the chat, David, you're in the weeds, and I will do my best to come out of the weeds and try to get back on track. But I will say maybe during the Q&A, we might have a chance to get a little into the weeds if you're willing. If there's somebody out there, you have a situation going on in your organization and you would love to kind of offer that up during the Q&A as like a case study, I'd love for us maybe to troubleshoot live how we might be able to address that challenge. There may be an idea that sparks while we're going through the presentation. And so please feel free, feel open to share if you're able to, right? Some things may be more private, but if you're able to share during the Q&A something that's going on, we may be able to use some of these strategies and talk about how they could directly apply to your organization. The last thing I'll say is that you're going to need something to write with or your phone to take notes in the second half of the presentation. So I invite you to prepare that right now. Well, with that being said, I want to show you three pictures of athletes that I think you may know. The first one is a Bay Area favorite, none other than the Stephen Curry. All right, the 3-point NBA leader, right? Nobody has as many 3 points made as Stephen Curry. He is, and in fact, he did it faster than anyone else, has a higher shooting percentage than most of the people on the list. And not only that, but he's won 3 NBA championships, and he's a 2-time NBA MVP. Now, he was elected his second time as an MVP. He was elected unanimously. No other player has received the MVP award and has been elected unanimously. He's absolutely incredible. Second picture, Serena Williams. Come on, y'all know her, 23-time Grand Slam winner. She is an absolutely incredible athlete. She not only won 23 Grand Slams, but check this out. After 30, she won 9 of those 23, which is 6 more than any other woman has won after the age of 30. Okay, so I want you to get that she won 9 after the age of 30. She's won 73 titles in total. And maybe the greatest accolade that she has is that in the totality of her career, she has been ranked number 1 for 319 weeks. 319 weeks, the longest streak of which was a 186-week streak where she was ranked number 1. absolute phenom. Last picture is Cristiano Ronaldo. He's a soccer player, or the rest of the world calls it football, but I'll use our local vernacular here. He is the leading soccer scorer of all time. Of all time, he has more scores than anyone else. He is a 5-time UEFA champion. That's like the Super Bowl for the European Soccer League. And he's won it 5 times. No other player has done that. And on top of all that, get this, every premier tournament in Spain, Portugal, and England, he's won them all. So every top tier soccer tournament in all of those countries, those are 3 of the 5 top soccer countries in the world, Cristiano Ronaldo has won them all. But I want you to consider something with me for a second. These pictures paint another side of their story. They paint another part of their journey. These are not pictures of, no, go back 1 second. These are not pictures of folks who are experiencing the joys of winning, right? These are folks who are experiencing some challenges that come with being a successful athlete. And I want you to consider with me for just a moment, what do these athletes have in common? And I want you to put that in the chat if you're willing. That's right, they have all, somebody already put it. Come on now, I love this. Who is that? Lars, thank you, Lars, you're already in the chat. They have all overcome injuries. That's right. There are people of color, trials and triumphs. That's right, I love it. Come on, what else you got? They've experienced pain. Come on, that's right, perseverance. I love it. What else you have? That's it, they've all persevered through their injuries. That's right, push. Oh, come on, Daniel, that's right, push through the pain. That's gotta be one of the key ones there. Oh man, I didn't know that. Okay, they're all Christians. They all believe in God. Didn't realize that. They're disciplined. They've all faced racism. That's right, discipline. They were all unexpected to succeed at the outset. Who's that? Jelaine. Thank you, Jelaine. That's so true. They've overcome challenges. They're overcomers, leading by example. Love it. All of this is good. All of it's true, right? There's one thing I want to draw your attention to, though. One thing. All of the things that you said are true. In fact, they have many things in common, maybe even more than we could describe during this time. But there's one thing I want to draw your attention to, that all of them have learned how to adapt. They've all learned how to adapt. When they've experienced challenges, when they've experienced setbacks, they have learned how to adapt in order that they may be able to move forward. Stephen Curry has had 27 injuries that he has suffered during his career. And you can see the quote on the screen there. If you can't see it, I'll read it to you. He said that for a 2-year period, he just felt like he was rehabbing for 2 years straight, and it didn't feel like he was going to play again. And yet in that dark moment, he was able to find something within himself, adapt, overcome those struggles, and get to the championship. Serena Williams, she's had many injuries as well, but I just put up here the 4 surgeries she's had. Get this, after she gave birth. She had 4 surgeries after she gave birth. She's all these kind of health challenges, like a pulmonary embolism. She's had all of these issues, significant stuff that would have taken other people out of the game. But she was able to go through these surgeries, and she was back on the court after having a child in less than a year, even with dealing with all of these surgeries. Then Cristiano Ronaldo, he's had 17 injuries, at least known injuries. And the reason why I say known injuries is because we're not sure he's actually reported all of his injuries. Recently, they were thinking that he had lost his mojo, and folks were thinking, his career was on the decline, only to find out he was playing through the last season injured because he felt like he needed to make a sacrifice for his club and the national team. And you see it there. He said he did it full of pride. Right? But he recognized that being on the field was more valuable to his team than being off the field. So he adapted in order to ensure that his club and the national team were able to be successful. And I want to suggest to you today that the thing that resilient people have in common with resilient organizations is that they adapt. That is what I want to hang the rest of our presentation on is that resilient organizations adapt, and your organization can learn how to adapt. And I want us to dig into that today. Resilient organizations learn how to adapt. And I want to show you a definition of what it means to be a resilient organization. Now, there's many technical different definitions out there, but this definition for me helps to paint the picture of what being a resilient organization really is, right? It helps to communicate the passion and energy behind a resilient organization. And here's what it says. Resilient organizations have the capacity to adapt to disturbances and seize opportunities emerging from the changed environment. I'm going to read it again, not because you didn't get it, but just because I want to emphasize it. Resilient organizations have the capacity to adapt. That means they got the capability, they've got the ability within them. They have the capacity to adapt to disturbances. We're going to talk about what I mean by disturbances, and seize opportunities emerging from the way the environment has changed. A disturbance will change your environment, and a resilient organization knows how to adapt to seize the opportunity that has resulted from the changed environment. Now, hold it right there. Sarah, we can, when we talk about disturbances, a lot of times we think about the big crises, right? Like a global pandemic like we've been dealing with for the last couple of years. Anybody tired? Anybody ready to be fully free of this thing? All right, okay, maybe I'm by myself on that one, but I doubt it. I imagine I got community on that one. But we have been in this global pandemic, which is like kind of like a large crisis. When I think of a big disturbance to our life or to organizational life, I think of it as a crisis, right, or as a crisis. But that's true. That is a disturbance, but there's also small disturbances, and resilient organizations know how to adapt to the big and the small disturbances. Some small disturbances may be things like loss of grant funding, decline in donations, loss of staff. How about this one? Challenges with existing staff. I wonder if anybody has that challenge. Right, that can be a disturbance. One of the other ones that I think is also common, especially for folks who are kind of like really on the front lines, is there can be changes in the organizational ecosystem. And here's what I mean by the organizational ecosystem. All of us have organizations that do work that are similar to the work that we do. Right. And so everybody that does work that is similar to the work that we do, I call that part of our organizational ecosystem. And sometimes there's changes where organizations start doing things differently within that ecosystem, and we can start feeling left behind. Like everybody's, doing fundraising in a particular way, or everybody has a new way of accomplishing a certain project or goal. And if we haven't kind of progressed, we may feel like we're kind of behind the times, and now we're kind of trying to figure out how do we move forward. And so that can be a disturbance as well. And what I want to highlight, though, is that each one of these disturbances, they bring an opportunity. There's an opportunity built into the disturbance that if you can identify it and adapt to adjust to it, then you can actually use the disturbance as an opportunity to grow so that we can execute at the highest level and fulfill our mission. Because remember, the goal is not to grow for the sake of growing, but the goal is to grow so that we can have greater impact on our communities. Because organizations, here's what I've learned, the research bears this out, organizations that adapt tend to perform better. I want you to hear that again. Organizations that adapt, you can switch the slide for me, tend to perform better. I got you. Okay, I skipped one, but I'm going to come back. Go to the next one for me real quick. Organizations that adapt tend to perform better. They tend to perform better. And so I want to ask you a question. Let's go back to that slide. How does your organization normally respond to unexpected disturbances? Now, I'm not going to ask you to put that in the chat because I think that you may not want to out yourself, but can I just talk about how I know a lot of organizations respond to unexpected disturbances? We respond like a fire person trying to put out a fire, right? It's like we put out one fire, then we're on to putting out the next fire, then we're on to putting out the next fire. And what that does, and maybe I can speak to somebody's heart today, is it leaves us feeling drained and exhausted, like we don't have any space to think or any more energy to actually do anything positive, creative, or adaptive with the time that we have left. So I get it. This is how organizations often respond, but I need you to learn how to adapt, because it's going to help you. It's going to help you to be able to have more energy, more space in your mind, more time on your schedule to actually execute at a higher level. Because organizations that adapt, not only do they perform better, but and this is the key to the presentation today, is that they tend to not only survive, but thrive. You can go to that slide, Saran, for me. They tend to, one more, they don't just survive, they thrive. And that's what I want your organization to do. I want your organization to thrive. I want you to be excited to go to work every day. I want you excited to be able to have this opportunity to impact your community in the way that you're impacting it. I want you powered and fueled up and fired up to take the next step and the next big leap and to go to that donor that you've been scared to talk to for all this time and actually go to them with confidence, because you know you've been adjusting things behind the scenes to ensure that you are creating the best organization possible. I want you ready to be able to step in that grant maker's door, into that foundation office, to that foundation leader's office, and actually feel that you are prepared to ask for that large sum of money that you never thought possible for your organization. And I believe that that happens when we are doing the work to create an adaptive organization that will not only survive, but thrive. So I want to share with you eight strategies that you can jump to, that 8 strategies that will help your organization thrive. So if you're ready for that, come on, let's say I'm ready. Come on, put it in the chat real quick. Will you help me out? Just say I'm ready. I'm ready for the 8 strategies, and let's jump in. Let's jump into those. All right. So once we get to each strategy, I want you, this is why I said you need something to write with. Because, or, if you have your phone and you want to take notes in your phone, but for each strategy, it's going to have the title, it's going to have a statement, and then I want you to respond to that statement before I explain the strategy. And you're going to be able to respond like you're taking a survey, but you're just going to do it yourself. Nobody's looking at it, it's just you. So it only behooves you to be truthful. But I want you to respond to that statement. And when you respond, there's going to be a number above the response that you would choose, and then write down that number. Okay, and you'll see once we get to the slide, because it's going to be important for you to track. Today, I want you to have like a baseline for where you are, where your organization is from an adaptive capacity standpoint. And that's what we talk about when we talk about being adaptive. We want to actually analyze our capacity. And so I want you to know what your adaptive capacity score is as an organization, and I want you to know that today. So let's go to the first strategy, which is creativity and innovation. Creativity and innovation. This is the first strategy that will help you to develop an adaptive organization that will be resilient in turbulent times. And so please respond to this statement. Team members and volunteers are rewarded for thinking outside the box. Now you're responding as your organization. How true is this statement within your organization? Team members and volunteers are rewarded for thinking outside of the box. All right, now do you strongly disagree? Disagree? Are you neutral on that statement? Do you agree with that statement? Or do you strongly agree? And whichever one you choose, there's a little number on top of it. Just write down the number. You don't have to write down strongly agree or disagree or neutral or whatever. Just write down the number that is associated with your answer to the statement, okay? How true is this for your organization? Team members and volunteers are rewarded for thinking outside of the box. All right, go ahead and take a note. Now you can put it in the chat if you want. You can put it in the chat, but I want you to note it to yourself, okay? Note it to yourself because we're going to add up these scores at the end. But I want you to note it to yourself because that's even more important than putting it in the chat. I want to give you a little explanation on each one, and then I'll give you an action step for each one. So the little explanation for this is that when you hear thinking outside of the box, here's what I want you to think about. I want you to think about thinking beyond the box. And I think this is actually a more useful way to phrase or understand thinking outside of the box is to think about thinking beyond the box. That means thinking beyond the common practices that currently exist within our organization. That means thinking beyond the way we're used to doing business, as it were, right? The way we're used to operating, right? Like thinking beyond that. How often are team members and volunteers in your organization rewarded for thinking beyond the box, right? It's important that we continue to push the opportunities to create space where it's comfortable and it's welcomed and it's celebrated to think beyond the box, right? Because here's the fact of the matter. Every organization gets in a rut at some point. Every organization, I'm going to say it this way, I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but I know it to be true in my own organizational life. Every organization gets stale sometimes, or you plateau, or you start to experience a bit of a plateau, right? And so creativity and innovation, thinking beyond the box, helps us to continue to evaluate whether or not what we're doing actually is most effective for accomplishing our mission. I know sometimes it may be most effective for maintaining that grant. I know it may be effective sometimes for making sure you get the right numbers to appease folks who may be putting some dollars in the budget. But is it the most effective thing to fulfill the mission? Because here's the thing, if you get in a habit of just running after the numbers and your practices, your behaviors help you to just keep the numbers going, you will have an organization, but you will not have an organization that thrives. You won't have an organization that is continuing to improve, continuing to level up year after year, continuing to reach new benchmarks and goals that you haven't even anticipated, right? Like that's what we want. We want this organic organization that is continuing to reach new heights. And if you're going to do that, you got to have creativity and innovation that's helping you to think beyond the box of the common practices that you are currently used to. One of the ways that you can do this is very simple. Here's your action step. Start rewarding creativity and innovation if you're not doing it now. If you are doing it now, do it at a higher level. The other thing that you can do is you can spark creativity and innovation through experimentation. So sometimes what we need to do is we need to take $100, $1,000, or whatever is comfortable for you and your organization and try some new stuff, right? Just try. And it might fail, and that's okay. Let's fail and learn. We don't just fail to fail, we fail so we can learn. And then when we learn, it helps us to be in a better position to get that $10,000, get that $100,000, or to develop new partnerships and relationships, right? We can break the monotony of what's happening in our organization by experimentation, by saying, you know what, we're going to try this out. We're going to test this idea. It may or may not work, but we're going to learn something either way. And that learning is going to help us in the future. All right, so that is strategy number one. Strategy number one is creativity and innovation. The second strategy is responsive decision making. Here's the statement and what I want you to respond to. We are able to shift rapidly from business as usual to respond to disturbances. Go ahead and respond to that right now. We are able to shift rapidly from business as usual to respond to disturbances. Strongly disagree, neutral, agree, or strongly agree. Where do you stand on that? Write down your name, write down the number that is associated with your response to this statement, right? We are able to shift rapidly from business as usual to respond to disturbances. Here's the simple question I have for you. Are you flexible enough to shift your normal mode of operations to respond to the opportunities that are presented by a disturbance? Are you flexible enough? And I got to tell you, one of the hindrances to this is centralized decision-making. I want you to hear me, that centralized decision-making is the antithesis to responsive decision-making. So when centralized decision-making is when decisions are bottlenecked at one or two individuals, right? So everything has to go through these individuals. And if it doesn't get their approval, then it doesn't happen. Well, that can make it very difficult, particularly when a disturbance arises, when that grant is lost, or when the funding declines, or when there's some shift in your staffing. That can be difficult to actually be able to respond quickly or respond effectively when the decision making is all bottlenecked at one or two people. So I would say that one of the simple action items to this is decentralize your decision making, because that can help to improve your responsiveness, which means that you got to just allow some folks to make decisions that you may not be comfortable with, right? There's some decisions that may end up happening that you're like, I would have done it differently. But there's going to be a solution to that I'm going to talk about in one of the strategies, of the strategy 6, I believe, that's going to help balance out this responsive decision making. But a key action item that I want you to think about applying is decentralizing your decision making so that you can be more responsive. Here's the third strategy. This is one of my favorite ones: collaborative independence. Collaborative independence. And here's the statement: there's a sense of teamwork in our organization, and people are willing to own a problem until it is resolved. Now, there's two parts to that. I don't want you to miss them. There is a sense of teamwork in our organization, and people are willing to own a problem until it is resolved. Go ahead and respond to that now. Do you strongly disagree to this statement? Do you disagree just, tepidly with this statement? Are you kind of neutral on it? Do you agree that there's teamwork and people are willing to own a problem until it is resolved? Or do you strongly agree to that? Go ahead and write that down for yourself. What is the condition of your organization? Now, quick explanation. There's two parts to this. And I love thinking about it in this way. So I hope you can get it. I hope y'all can get this one. The first part is, do we work well together? And the way that I think of this is, do we huddle well together? Like when we come together for a huddle, think about, football game, American football, that is, right? Like, do we huddle well together? Well, how do you know if you huddle well together? First of all, does everybody show up to the huddle? Does everybody show up on time to the huddle, right? Are certain special individuals able to be exempted from the huddle, right? When we huddle, do we listen well to one another? Are we just hoping the meeting will end soon, right? And not only do we listen well to one another, but do people feel free to contribute the facts that they may have, that they have ascertained from the work that they're doing in support of the organization? Do they feel comfortable contributing when they get to the huddle? It's understood that there's going to be a quarterback in every huddle, but if the wide receiver doesn't provide information about the defensive back who's guarding him, and the wide receiver realized that on the last play, the defensive back hurt his leg and he's going to run a little bit slower. If that wide receiver doesn't feel comfortable providing that information when we huddle, then the organization, the team, is going to miss out on an opportunity. They're going to miss out on seizing an opportunity that is available because of the disturbance, right? So the first part is, do we huddle well together? That's the collaborative part. But then once we huddle, are people empowered and willing to work when necessary independently to execute on the play that was collaboratively decided upon in the huddle? So do people feel comfortable that they can go out and get the job done and they have the tools to get the job done? Do they feel that they're able to do that, or do they feel that that things are managed so tightly that they're more concerned about doing it wrong than doing it at all. And so this is key. This is key. And I could talk about this one for a lot, so I'm not going to get in the weeds. I said I wasn't going to get in the weeds, but there is the action item for this one is that I think makes the most impact is simply this. We have to have leaders who know how to coach. You got to have leaders. You want your organization to be adaptive? You have to have a leader who knows how to coach, a leader who has the ability to work with their team members to say, hey, listen, this is the direction we're going, and then is able to give their team members enough freedom so that that team member can then go out and execute. And the leader doesn't stand back and like, oh, well, hey, whatever happens, happens. No, that leader is there to build up, empower, to redirect when necessary, to help troubleshoot, to maybe even get on the front lines, roll up their sleeves and help with a part of the project, right, when necessary. But a leader who knows how to coach will set the tone for the rest of the environment so that this collaboration and independence can go hand in hand. All right, let's jump to the next strategy, because it's really an add-on to this last one, and that is embodied leadership. Here's the statement. Leaders in our organization, so simple. Leaders in our organization lead by example. Leaders in our organization lead by example. Do you strongly disagree? 1, disagree. 2, are you neutral on that? 3, do you agree? 4, or do you strongly agree? 5. Please mark it down real quick. What is it that most represents the organization that you lead or that you're part of? Embodied leadership. Leaders in our organization lead by example. Here's this is really self-explanatory, but I want to add just a little bit to it. Leaders, if you want to have an adaptive organization, you must embody the culture of the organization. I want you to hear that. Must embody the culture of the organization. So we don't have any leaders up in their castles looking from high, lofty places down at the lowly peasants who are doing their work. No, we have leaders who are willing to be the example, who are willing to actually live the life, if you will, that they talk about, or live the organizational life that they speak of, right? So when we talk about values of an organization, they're not something that just hang on the wall. You can actually see the values in practice through the way the leader interacts and leads the organization. And a key part of this is the adaptive part, right? If you want an organization that adapts, as a leader, you must be willing to adapt as well, right? And again, I could say a lot more on that, but the action step is that if you are a leader, and all of us are leaders on some level, and you may be leading up, or you may be leading down, or you may be leading laterally, all of us who are a leader on some level, it's critical that you embody what you desire to see. All right, let's move to the next one. I just want to make sure we're moving on a good track here. Proactive planning is our next strategy. Again, we plan for the unexpected. So when I said again, I meant, again, this is simple, but I want you to think about it critically. We plan for the unexpected. Strongly disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. Okay, which one fits your organization the best? Right? We plan for the unexpected. Now, oh man, there are a lot of models for planning out there. A lot. I mean, balanced scorecard, OKRs, OKRs are objectives and key results. There's a method to plan around objectives and key results. Another organization is another model for planning is the theory of change. And so all of these planning models are great, but there's one thing, if you want to take down this action step, I'd love for you to do it. There's one thing that I want you to consider the next time you sit down to plan. And as a side note, I would hope that all of our organizations are planning at least once a year, at least once. That's the kind of large, more macro planning. I tend to prefer micro planning because I think sometimes if you want to be able to take advantage of what is changing in your environment, or you want to be able to take some steps forward, sometimes it's helpful to plan on a quarterly basis or either on a monthly basis. But even if you're only sitting down to plan once a year, here's the key thing I want you to think about. if you're going to plan for the unexpected, assume that your assumptions about the future are going to be wrong. And then determine in advance how you're going to respond to that, right? So assume that your picture of the next year is so you go ahead and plan, put your goals on the wall, make sure that you're chasing after them with all of your heart, all of your energy, all of your organizational strategy and skill set, and then take a moment to say, okay, now let's assume that everything that we're planning for is not going to happen the way that we expect it will. How will we respond to that? And just that little bit of time, that little bit of thought will put your organization in a stronger position to adapt when Murphy's Law shows up, right? Because what can go wrong will go wrong. And so there are going to be some things, I hope for your organization that go far beyond what your goals are. But then there's going to be some things that don't quite happen the way that you expect that they would. And so if you're thinking in advance how you're going to respond to those, you'll be in a greater position. I'm telling you, there's some mental work that ends up happening, again, backed up by research. You're going to be in a greater position to be able to adapt in that moment when things don't go the way that you planned than if you hadn't taken the time to consider that your assumptions would be wrong. All right, let's go to the next strategy. Shared knowledge and shared information and knowledge. Here's the statement. Staff have the information and knowledge they need to respond to unexpected problems. Staff have the information and knowledge they need to respond to unexpected problems. All right, you've seen them there. You've heard me mention it. Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 for your organization? How true is this or not true for your organization? Go ahead and mark down your answer for that. All right. Here's what all this means. The right people have the right information. They're equipped with the right skill set at the right time. The right people have the right information. They're equipped with the right skill set at the right time. And a few of the things that we've talked about can help with this. Decentralized decision-making, for one, can really help with this because sometimes the sharing the information is easier when everybody is collecting the information, and that happens more fluidly when we have decentralized decision-making. So, you know, that can decentralized decision-making can really help with this one. And then also collaborative workspaces can help. So when we think about, or tools, collaborative work tools can help. When we think about tools like Asana or Slack or Basecamp or Flock or even Google Drive, right? These can help. But I'll tell you, here's the number one action item that I want you to write down for this one. The underlying component that cannot be quantified or is maybe not even easily addressed. The underlying component to shared information and knowledge is trust. Full stop. I don't care how small or big the organization is, it is trust. Look, you might be the only person in the organization. Question is, do you trust yourself? Right? It's trust, because I have found with organizations we have worked with that sometimes information is not being shared because individuals don't feel comfortable that information will be utilized in the appropriate manner. Folks are worried that information is going to be turned on them, or that somebody may seek to move forward and execute on something in a way that may not be appropriate for the organization. And I've just seen it over and over again that trust is the underlying piece here. So the real action item for this one is, how are you going to seek to rebuild trust in your organization if it's currently lacking, right? And sometimes if you're the leader, that means that you may have to put people on different teams, or there may be some folks who may have to be reorganized out of the organization, right? If you're a team member, you may have to do your part to develop some interpersonal relationships in order for that trust to be more fluid. If you are just kind of starting out, sometimes, folks who may feel like you're just kind of getting into the organization, you may underestimate the power of influence that you have through suggestion, right? Through just saying, have we considered that? Have we thought about this? Have you had a conversation with that person? Have you taken the time to understand what's going on in their journey, right? Sometimes you may have more influence than you have, even if you're new to the organization. And so, but trust is the key factor here for in shared information and knowledge to really be a value to the organization. All right, we got two more. We're almost there. The seventh strategy is external collaboration. We build relationships. This is the statement. We build relationships with organizations we might have to work with in a crisis. Now, this is different. We're not just talking about disturbances here. We're talking about those big crises, right? Like those things that really are disruptive, like a global pandemic, a cyber attack, or other things. Maybe there's an earthquake, or, we build relationships with organizations that we might have to work with in a crisis. How true is this for your organization? You got 5 options there. Which one applies to you the best? All right. And I want you to write down that number that is associated with your with how true this is for your organization. Here's an action step for this, right? I think this is pretty clear. It's self-explanatory. Organizations need to have organizational friends, right? They need to have organizational friends. So we talked about that organizational ecosystem before, where you're in relationship, or you have fellowship with other organizations that are doing similar work to you. That's really important. And sometimes it's important to have, in fact, most of the time it's important to have relationships with organizations that don't do the same kind of work, so that there is that also some information sharing that's going from organization to organization, kind of across disciplines, right? That's important as well. But one of the action steps here is, if you don't have friends, organizational friends, right? So an organization that's like a sister to another organization, or a brother, then it's important to develop that. You may have to create your own network if one doesn't exist, right? You may have to create kind of your own little circle of organizations, but whatever it takes, it's critical. It's critical to have a set of organizations that you guys kind of work together as friends. And I'll tell you that this benefit is right. That's right, Arlene, intersectionality. I love that. This benefit is not just for the big crisis. This is for times when things aren't in turmoil. I'll tell you that our organization here has, as a result of a friendship that we have, organization to organization, has generated $200,000 additional dollars in grant funding as a result of a relationship we have. And there's a potential additional $500,000 that is coming down the line as a result of a relationship. And we've benefited them as well. They're working on this big peace park, right? They have 10 acres of land, and they want to turn it into this peace park. And we were able to help them connect with a foundation that we had a relationship, but that was interested in doing some environmental work. And now they're still in development, but it's already been registered on the National Registry for Urban Forestry. And they have been able to access some dollars to do the Peace Park, replanting native trees and taking out invasive species and all of this, at no cost to the organization itself. All of the funding has been provided externally. And this has been a result of just having organizational friends. And so external collaboration, I cannot understate how important it is, not just for the disturbance, not just for the crisis, but for the regular operations of the organization. All right, hopefully these 7 have been good. We got one last one. All right, one last one for you. It is the 8th strategy is management and monitoring of resources. I had to put this one in here. And here's the statement. our organization maintains sufficient resources to absorb some unexpected change. Our organization maintains sufficient resources to absorb some unexpected change. Where do you stand on this scale, right? Are you at the bottom, you in the middle, you at the top, right? Where are you at? And mark down the number that is associated with your response. Here's the action step for this. And this may be simple for some folks who, like, you may be further along in your organization, but I've actually seen this issue in organizations of all sizes and of all ages. And so I'm giving you some simple action steps that I think can be applied readily. This one is put a cap on your operational budget, right? Know that you generate X amount of dollars in revenue, and say that you're only going to spend 90% of that, right? You're only going to spend 80% of that, for some who can be even more aggressive, or 70%. Because I have found that when you have, and this is not just my experience, this is also backed up by research, and I imagine that for many of you, this is not a shocker, but that when you have those reserves, those financial reserves, it allows you to seize the opportunities more readily. It allows you to absorb a shock or an unexpected occurrence more easily when that reserve is there, but you got to plan for it. You got to build that into your budget. You know, one of the things that I've seen some organizations do, they build their budget off the previous year, not off the current year. And that's one way that they account for that. Others, like I said, just put a percentage cap. And there's other strategies as well. But the point is that you are building in some operational reserve, some financial reserve, so that you can use that reserve to leverage the opportunities that a disturbance is going to present, because disturbances are going to come. There is a lot of research that has shown that these disruptions that we've experiencing within organizational life is not just something that is connected to COVID, but it's been going on for a while now, and it's only going to get more intense as we continue to move on. So disturbances are going to be, and already are in many ways, part of the regular organizational issues that we have to deal with. And so we need those reserves in order so that we can take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to us. So here we have the eight strategies. Now let me summarize them for you. All right. Creative innovation. You can go to the next slide, Saran. Creativity and innovation, responsive decision-making, collaborative independence, embodied leadership, proactive planning, shared information and knowledge, external communication, and management and monitoring of resources. Okay, so I want you to give yourself a score, add up all of your points that you got there, and total it up. What score did you get? If you want to share it, you can put it in the chat. If you don't, I understand that as well. But here's how you can kind of know where you stand. Now, I want to say that, you know, the research on these ranges has not been finalized yet, so there's more to do. These ranges are not hard and fast, but I do hope that it gives you a sense of where your adaptive capacity ranks, right? Where it ranks. And then I hope that from there, you're able to choose one of these strategies, 2, 3, 4 of these strategies to begin implementing immediately so that you can move up, so that you can level up to the next level. So if you scored from 0 to 12, that's on the low end. Oh, that's awesome. 37. Come on now, Ariel. 20. Okay. All right. I got you. Nicole, you in there? All right. They're coming in. Very good. Very good. Yeah. Well, we're on the higher end. Go ahead, y'all. All right. We're dealing with some resilient organizations. Well, look, if you're in the 0 to 12, that's on the lower side. If you're 13 to 20, you're still developing. 21 to 31, you're in the strong range, right? And then 32 to 40, you're knocking it out the park. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not room to grow, even if you're in that excellent tier. I see more coming in. Somebody said, I'm jealous. Terry Carlisle, that's all right. We can work through this thing. You can grow. right? It's better to be honest about where you are. Are there others who are populating in here? Nadine is saying we have plenty of room to go. That's all right. Listen, what's most important is that you get a sense of where you are, because the only problem with being honest about where you are is if you choose to do nothing about it. But I have found that if I can get a sense of where I stand and have some kind of objective view of that, then I can start putting together some strategies to grow and to become stronger. We got 25 here. We've got, all right, Nicole, preach. Yes, I have a tendency to do that sometimes. 25, 33, 18, Brian, okay, come on now. All right, Lenore, we got a 30, or Leora, sorry about that. All right, y'all are coming in, I love it. Very good, Terry, I'm happy to share. So let me leave you with, before we get to, yes, that's right, it is not an opportunity, it is not a competition. That's why I'm glad that some of y'all were willing to share your real results, no matter where they were, and say, hey, listen, this is where we are, but we're gonna go to the next level. So I wanna share with you, again, the definition of a resilient organization. I don't want you to forget this. Resilient organizations have the capacity to adapt to disturbances and seize opportunities emerging from the changed environment. So I wanna encourage you to get your organization in gear. Get your organization in gear, because I'm convinced that you can get better no matter how good or how challenged you think your organization is. You can get better. Your organization can operate and execute at a higher level, and you can fulfill your mission. If you choose to adapt, you will also thrive. So I leave you with that. Go and adapt and thrive. You can switch to that last slide, adapt and thrive, because I want to see you like those champions on the slide before. You can go back there for me, Saran. I want to see you like those champions, winning at every stage in your game, exceeding your goals, even when you've been faced with the most difficult challenges. And if you adapt and thrive, I believe that that's going to happen for you and your organization. So thank you for your time. And I want to hand it back to Carmen so we can deal with some questions.
Here I am. Okay, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Franklin. Your community here in the Bay Area does not refute that for a minute, Dr. Franklin, especially after this presentation. This was amazing and very helpful. And I think that the thing I love about it is it gives us something to aspire to. It gives us some meat here to work with when we go back to our organizations. I want to open the floor for some questions.
We had Tony Wallace had their hand up for a while now.
Yes, Tony. Where's Tony? Tony, would you like to unmute and ask your question? Okay, so let me just get, someone wanted to know, let's see, we have excellent strategies. Thank you so much. All right, so we'd like to have some questions from you all, because some of you are asking if this is going to be made available. I have a question. So Dr. Franklin, do you have any suggestions? I mean, like you're at the end of your PhD process, and this is all very familiar to you, but how do you recommend that a leader takes this to their team? Do you have can you give a practical strategy for actually doing this for maybe in a meeting or several meetings? Do you think it should be a series of meetings where they work on these things? What's your suggestion?
Yeah, well, the first thing I think is what we've done already, which is kind of to get a sense of where you stand, right? And it may be helpful for other folks in the organization to kind of give their responses on how they feel they rate from a adaptive capacity standpoint, like how well are they able to adapt. But then once you've kind of gotten to that point, then I think it's important to then look at one or two of the strategies, and then, yeah, like, let's have a conversation. Let's do that huddle. Let's do that collaborative part where we talk about what adjustments we can make to actually implement the strategy. And maybe more importantly, what's currently keeping us from doing it now? Like, why haven't we done it at the moment? And I think that if we're able to have those conversations openly and honestly, then, we'll be in a better position to actually execute on the particular strategy. And I might say just quickly here, if you're a leader, now I've been nice. I think I've been nice the whole presentation, right? I've been nice. This may not be nice. Okay, this may not be nice, right? If you're a leader, you have. I'm not giving you any excuses. You have no excuse. You've got no. If you are leading the organization, you set the tone. It's time to level up. You've got to make the adjustment and say, we're not going to stay in this rut. And listen, I don't care how young or old you are, how small or big the organization is. You got to say, okay, we're not where we need to be. I'm not going to beat myself up about that, right? This is not about blame and frustration. I'm not going to beat myself up about that. But now that I know where I am, I'm going to make the changes so that, again, you hear me keep emphasizing this, we can execute at a higher level and fulfill our mission, because we got a community that can benefit from it. So that's what I would say to that.
Okay, so I have two people who have questions, but I also have a suggestion for another session, Dr. Franklin, at some point, maybe in 2023 class, and that is managing up, because there are people who see all of this and maybe they don't have the power to make those changes, because sometimes leaders are not aware of how tightly they're holding the reins, and sometimes making these kinds of changes or adjustments really requires that processes are fluid to the extent that changes can be made. So we have two speakers or two questions. One first, George Cummings, and then Alora Deal. So George, could you unmute and ask your question?
Thank you, Dr. Franklin, for this presentation. I have a question. In my organization, we did in the last year organizational inventory, as well as an individual inventory of every staff member. And that was very helpful for us, but it was a difficult process because it required transparency and honesty. In your presentation, you talked about embodied leadership. Now, I know what I think about when I mean leadership, but I'm interested in what your definition of leadership is.
Great question.
Yeah, I boil down leadership to influence. That's what I boil down leadership to. It's the ability to influence, and you can influence. And this somewhat leads to what Carmen was talking about just a moment ago. And that is that, hey, if I'm in another part of the organization and I don't feel like I have the power, well, what do? Well, sometimes, let me just be frank. Sometimes you do have to leave an organization if you feel like this is not the right fit for you. However, I think maybe more often, to your point, George, is that if I may call you George, I didn't ask you how you like to be referred to, but influence is not necessarily something that comes with position. Influence is often about relationship. And so no matter where you are in the organization, if you have relationship, you most often can positively influence even your boss, or sometimes I have seen CEOs listen to, I hate to think about hierarchical structure, so I don't want to say, but you understand what I'm saying. The person who just got in the organization, I've seen CEOs be like, yeah, I want to talk to you. What's your idea? And they may not implement it all, but they hear a portion of it. And I've seen them take that and actually adopt that into their strategy and into their planning. So I would say that embodied leadership is not just for those who are at the top rungs of the leadership strata in your organization. It's for anyone and who is part of the organization who understands how to utilize their influence to make a positive impact.
David, wouldn't you also say that relationship and influence are so interwoven? Because if you have people in the organization that you can communicate with, that you can relate to, it's much easier for that kind of person, someone who is emotionally and socially intelligent, that it's much easier to relate to them and to work with them. So I would add to leadership also people who are relatable.
Oh yeah.
Who understand that it's not me and the team, but I also am part of that team, and we're working together. And sometimes that messaging gets blocked in organizations because I think that leaders often take themselves too seriously, and we don't get a chance to get to other people because it's I and me. I'm gonna toss over to Alora Deal. Alora, can you unmute?
Oh, yes. Hi, thank you. I just want to say thank you for your expertise, Dr. Franklin, and your enthusiasm. My question is, some organizations get very comfortable in old routine, and part of the reason why they don't want to change is because of fear. And overcoming that fear and learning to develop trust and implement this strategy and this process. I know you said relationships is key, and my connection to relationship is communication, but how can an organization realize, a person who's in a leadership role, look at this presentation that you've given and realize that if they implement these strategies, it's actually going to help them learn how to stay relevant, evolve, and make a larger impact instead of staying in what they're comfortable with because they're not used to change, or they feel that change could be disruptive to the process they already have in place.
Yeah, and let me be clear, too much change can cause problems. So I don't want to suggest that, every day we come up with a new idea. We don't need organizational, we don't need to be organizationally divided in the way that we're moving forward. But specifically to your question, which is, and if I'm not clear, please clarify for me, how do leaders within an organization begin to see a new picture of the organization that will help them to implement adaptive strategies? Is that fair?
Yes, that is fair. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think I might ask you a couple questions first, and that is, how long has the organization been around?
So I'm not going to go specific into
Okay.
and answer any questions specifically, but just because I feel like this whole presentation is very helpful to all organizations, but you have sometimes in general, organizations do not want to implement change because they fear that if they adapt or they evolve, they'll lose control. And that sort of, that foundation is fear, and then they miss the boat, and then they become sort of obsolete.
Yes.
Or are unable to communicate with this generation and what is happening.
Yes.
And they get sort of snowballed over.
Yes, this is you're absolutely right. This is what I was talking about with the organizational ecosystem and how folks end up being left behind. Yeah, my answer to you is that generally, okay, I'll tell you what I've seen happen. 3 things. The first one is the leader gets removed. That's the first thing. The second one is that the leader experiences, along with the organization, some kind of crisis that forces them to change. And then the last one is that there, and this goes back to what I was saying, and maybe I've seen 2 other things actually, but this third one I've seen more common, which is there's some person within the organization that has the ear of that leader and is able to help them process why change is valuable for the organization. And I won't use names, but I'm going to give you an example of that. I was working with an organization. They had chosen to go one way with to select a leader for this organization that really wasn't the best fit. But there were some realities that caused them to make that decision. There was a person within the organization that had the ear of the chair of the board and was helping them to see how the new leader was actually causing harm to the legacy of the organization. As a result, despite it required quite a bit of organizational change, they went ahead, sat that leader down, and put the leader who everybody in the organization knew should be taking the helm at that time. But it required that intimate, private conversation to happen with a trusted friend. And so, unfortunately, if folks are really resistant to change, it can be fairly difficult to get them to see a new picture of the organization and why it's so critical to change. But if they have that trusted person exists, I've seen the tides shift as a result of it. So hope that helps a little bit. Happy to confer a little bit more, maybe in a private way, so that you can talk about the details.
I want to just say something that, by way of encouragement, in terms of those folks who may not be at the top of the organization in terms of hierarchy. My nephew was working in tech for Disney, and he was in charge of this one tech for this one component of Disney. And one of his clients within the organization was Michael Eisner. And Eisner wasn't very good at technology. And whenever my nephew would come in to fix the breakdowns, Eisner was really grateful, but they would begin to talk about other things. And my nephew was able to really influence some of the things that Eisner didn't want to ask other people about because they were too high up in the organization. And by asking my nephew, there was no risk. And so they had some really deep conversations. And when Eisner was there, he really felt that he was able to influence some of his decisions all the way up in that organization, which is quite amazing. But it also speaks to other organizations as well. And that was purely about relationships. One of the things that my nephew was able to do is to convince that component of Disney to have monthly Bible sessions, because my nephew's a minister. And so they started bringing in pastors and Disney. I mean, Disney kills off all the mamas, and there's always a demon at the end of it. But he convinced Eisner to bring in folks like Clarence McClendon and some of the other ministers of LA to come in and do presentations to those people in the staff who wanted to pray or who wanted to talk about other ways of approaching each other and some of their work. So you can influence up. You can manage up. And there's actually a book called Managing Up. I don't know if you're aware of it, David.
Yeah.
But there's a really great book called Managing Up for staff members. Are there other questions? We have a few minutes. Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Scott, Nadine Scott. Nadine, did you have a question?
No, she had an announcement in the chat, but we do have a question from Pastor Paul Baines.
Thank you. I was leaving. I'm sorry, I have to leave.
Okay, thank you so much. It's so good to see you. Good to see you.
God bless you all.
You too. So Paul Baines, Pastor Baines.
Yes.
Okay.
My question I had put in the chat was regarding what do you foresee, Dr. Franklin, as the most common issues that nonprofits are facing and or have been facing during this COVID crisis, and what do you foresee within the next year to 2 years as being obstacles, and what would you recommend to address those obstacles?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The first thing that comes to mind is beyond the physical, meaning that we're meeting virtually right now, And I think that still, even after 2 years, a lot of nonprofits are struggling to understand how to deliver on their mission when they're not able to show up in front of people all the time, right? Or people aren't able to come to them all the time, right? So how do we continue to iterate on what we've learned by through COVID? How do we continue to iterate on executing from a virtual perspective as opposed to having to do physical things? And I guess I could say a lot about that, but that's really the number one thing that jumps to my mind, is that I still find, for example, there's folks who are still holding on to buildings who don't need them anymore, right? Like you're draining dollars from your organizational budget trying to maintain a mortgage that doesn't actually fully serve your mission. Now, maybe you say that it's an asset and it's appreciating, and so you want to hold on to it. I'm not saying that there's not ever a reason to hold on to a building, but I know larger organizations that have realized that since COVID, they've been saving, and this one, and I'm thinking of particularly, they've been saving like $1 million a month, because of the lack of travel and the physical spaces not being used enough. They literally just shutting down offices, selling off the property if they owe them or whatever. So I'm just saying that I think it's this thinking we have thought for a very long time, understandably so. How do we deliver on our mission within physical spaces or with physical interaction? And I think what's going to continue to endure, way beyond COVID, anyway, I don't even want to talk about metaverse and all of that. But anyway, when we start talking about, what life is going to continue to look like, I think that we have to be able to understand how to fulfill our mission in ways that operate both physically and virtually, not necessarily making the physical space the primary space in which we achieve our mission. So that's what I would need some more time to think about the other 2 or 3, but that's the number one right off the top of my head.
And I'm so glad you said that, because that is our session 4.
Okay.
So everybody come back for session 4. Saran is telling me we have to wrap up. So I would like you all to join me in thanking David. I'm being good. I'm not calling you Dr. Franklin, but your Bay Area family knows who you are. So thank you so much for this amazing presentation. And we're going to take everything that you've given us and put it into action. We have a very strong nonprofit community. We have one of the strongest nonprofit communities in the country. And so we're going to take everything that you've given us. This is going to really help us a lot in moving to the next phase. And I can see your auntie for the first time now. Everybody knows Sandra. Wave at Sandra. And then also Saran, I know you have some quick announcements. We want everybody to be able to, we want to end this on time because I know folks have things to go to. Brian Woodson, this is the first time I've seen you. And so anyway, let's sign off, but I know you have some announcements, and thank you again, David. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much again, David. We really appreciate you all. Please give a round of applause for that wonderful presentation that we had today. Thank you all so much for coming and staying for a few minutes as we go to our announcements. So yes, please take a minute to fill out the evaluation form. I am dropping this in the chat. And while you do that, please register for our 3rd session, which will be happening on April 28th for at same time, 10 to 11:30. Our topic will be fast forward, how to develop a new generation of transformational leaders. So please join us. We look forward to seeing you there. Moving on with our announcements, we want to remind you of our partnership with Model Built on Faith, Occur. There is going to be a proposal review and scorecard workshop happening on March 22nd and April 4th. So I'm going to drop the link, the RSVP link in the chat. This is really for if you were able to attend the February writing proposal workshop. If you had attended that, please make sure to follow up and attend this next one happening on the 22nd. Here's the RSVP link. I will be sending more information in my follow-up email as you will receive the slide deck and the recording from today's wonderful session. Okay, and if you have any questions, you can always email info@occurnow.org. And thank you so much for coming today. Again, we want to say thank you to David for stopping by and gracing us with a wonderful presentation. We so appreciate you all for coming on. Thank you so much to Ms. Carmen Bogan for her leadership, and to Michelle Miles Chambers as well for her leadership with Faiths. So I wish you all a blessed day, and look out for more information from us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Great day, everybody. Thank you again. Bye-bye.